Hi folks, I'm Andre, and I'm the lead gameplay designer for League of Legends. We wanted to talk to you a bit about unusual playstyles and experimental gameplay, and how we see those. It's a subject we've been getting a lot of questions and discussion around recently, so we figured it was a good time. For most champions, there's generally a common way to play them. Building a bunch of attack damage and attack speed and crit items on a marksman, for example, and playing them in the bot lane. That's pretty standard nowadays. On some champions, though, you'll see an unusual tanky build, or a weird split push or jungle invade playstyle, or a roaming support. Those style of things. And those can be unusual and still really effective. I think it's important that there's new things to discover and find, because that keeps the game fresh. The meta of the game will gradually change over time, or for those of you that are playing off meta, there's something new and unusual to experiment with as well. It also means that you can find what's best for you as a player. The particular champion that split pushes in the exact way that you're really good at, or that you enjoy the most. And trying to optimize that can be a lot of fun. So looking back at past seasons, we've seen a number of what were at the time experimental playstyles emerge, some of which have actually become almost the dominant playstyle, or have very much become the dominant playstyle since. Back in Season 1, for example, there was a commonly accepted wisdom for a while that you put a couple of fighters or tanks bot lane. And then some of the EU teams started doing this weird thing where instead of putting their marksmen in the mid lane, they'd actually put them bot lane with another character who wouldn't farm much at all. And over time, it was demonstrated, hey, this is really effective. And other teams started doing that as well. And so the game evolved to this situation where you've got an ADC and a support as pretty much the expected common thing bot lane. But that wasn't always the case. For a more micro example, at one point we started seeing Singed go from a unusual but standard laner to a champion who proxy farmed a lot more. He'd run behind the enemy's tower and far away from his own minions and help, and just kill minions by running around with poison trail, occasionally even getting pretty far towards the enemy base, and often dying a lot. And that was really weird and unusual and still really effective. And nowadays Singed play incorporates an awful lot of that. A few people trailblazed that way for a lot of the rest of the player base and showed how it was a cool and effective thing. So intent to win is what we think is most important. That as a player, if you're doing something unusual, you're trying to help your team get to victory, even if it may not be in a way that's well proven or that they necessarily completely understand. Because of that, it's really important that we distinguish between a player who is trolling and a player who is trying to win in an unusual way. And there's a few different things we can look at actually quite a lot of things, in order to make that determination. That includes things like, is this player trying to maximize their team's resources on Summoner's Rift relative to the other team? If you're giving up all of your minions, your golden experience from the top lane, for example, and you're not costing the enemy team even more, you're probably making a pretty terrible choice. By contrast, if you're giving up some of your team's access to minions and XP in the bot lane, but you're completely shutting down the enemy jungler, that could be a really good, effective strategy if you can pull it off. Other things to look at include how you use the resources that you've gathered. Are you just sitting on large amounts of gold and never buying anything? Or are you stacking multiple pairs of mobility boots that do nothing? So we'd certainly encourage you to talk to your team if you've got a really unusual playstyle. Help them understand what you're going for, how you're trying to win, that sort of thing. It gives you a better chance to win if your team are aware of how you're trying to change the game, what strategy you're trying to play, and they can work with you on that. In general, we really like seeing unique and interesting playstyles emerge and seeing the game evolve. But that doesn't mean that every single unique playstyle is necessarily a good one. In the same way that we have guidelines for what good gameplay looks like, counterplay, clarity, satisfaction, team cooperation, those sort of things. For any playstyle, we'd want those from the unusual ones as well. And so there have been times in the past where we've deliberately removed some uncommon playstyles because of the effect they have on the game. The clearest example of that in the past is probably AP Tryndamere. For any champion in the game, we want them to have noticeable strengths and weaknesses. They should be good at some things that, as the player of that champion, you try and take advantage of, and they should be weak at some things that as that player, you try and guard against, and as the enemy, you try to exploit. Tryndamere is designed so that his heal forces him to give up some of his auto-attack power, and he's actually got to build up that rage to get the heal in the first place as well, so there's some degree of interaction that goes into that. By contrast with AP Tryndamere, you don't need to build up rage, so there's none of that, attacking minions or champions to get it, and you're not auto-attacking all that much anyway, so you're not really making that trade-off. There's no mana cost on the ability either, so it effectively boiled down to push Q for large heal repeatedly. Tank Echo is actually another good example of a playstyle that we felt was problematic for the game. Echo's got some really powerful tools on his kit, particularly the stun on his W and the rewind effect on his ult. But those are counterbalanced by, as a melee guy, he's got to get in there, he's got to take some risks. And so there's a real risk-reward trade-off and some limited safety nets for him. Tank Echo, by contrast, is much more reliable. He can go in, he can reliably be in there long enough to proc the W, he can just gradually train you down. And the R, instead of being a, oh crap, and get out of there button, becomes a heal me for a lot, and then I'll go back to doing my really reliable thing. So yeah, the problem with Tank Echo, effectively, was not that he was really hard to kill. It was that he was not giving up enough in exchange for that. Tank Echo didn't have the burst of AP Echo, but he still had more than enough damage, especially over the longer fight times that he could live for, to more than make up for it. And so we felt that AP Echo was the much more engaging and exciting playstyle for both the Echo player and everybody else. And as a result, we shifted some power so that the AP builds are much more rewarded, and the reliable tank ones much less so. We've actually seen a couple of good examples recently of what historically would have been really unusual playstyles that have proven to both be pretty effective and pretty healthy for the game. The first of those is MF as a support, which most of us first saw in Worlds last year as a counterpick to Zyra. And that's been really cool, because she's still doing Misfortune-style things, she's still got those weaknesses, she still brings quite a bit of power in her ult, but she's doing it from the support position, so she's less concerned about that auto-attacking, playing more of a vision role on her team, more reliant on base damage than scalings, those sorts of things. And it also means that she's then laning with another ADC, and that then changes how, as that other ADC, you want to play. So you want somebody like Ashe, who brings a bunch of extra CC to support you, more than just raw damage. And if you play both ADC and support, there's then some interesting, hey, a champion I might already enjoy, I can now play in a different way. Cool. Botlane Ziggs was the other example, actually, that we saw at the start of this year that's still getting some play. As a team, you're getting a lot of extra tower pushing pressure, especially in the early game, from both the wave clear, his passive on towers, and the W's ability to execute low health towers. But you're also giving up that reliable auto-attack damage, and you're losing a source of physical damage on a team, which puts some constraints on what you can run in your other lanes. So Botlane Ziggs still has some clear strengths and weaknesses to him. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope this has been interesting. And we realize this is a pretty complicated topic with a range of different opinions on it, so we'd love to hear more from you, in the comments, on the forums, or wherever. Keep this discussion going.